Welcome to Eritrea YouTube channel and Nefasit.com. This is part 2 of our conversation with the renowned photojournalist Jemal Countess. We often complain about Western media. We complain about Western media bias, but not many do anything about it. Mr. Jemal Countess is one of the few, a handful, that does something about it. Jemal goes to Africa and exposes Western media bias in ways that mean something, in ways that make a difference. He was in Ethiopia during the war, the TPLF, and he was exposing the truth, exposing Western media bias. He went to Eritrea. He's exposing Western media bias. He's telling truth. He's uncovering history genuinely, truthfully. This is the first time blacks and Africans are working to uncover truth and to depict the accurate picture of what's going on in Africa. This is something that we need to get behind. This is something that we need to support. So, Mr. Jemal Countess could use your support. We need to encourage each other to be our own information outlet. Mr. Countess's photojournalism is profound. It tells the accurate stories, and he does it in the most sincere, honest, and the way that it is supposed to be told. So make sure to support his endeavors any way you can. How did the Eritrea picture come about to start talking about Eritrea from this point on?
Well, similar thing. It's like, Eritrea was being demonized right, left, and center. And I was like, just because of my experiences in Addis at the end of the TPLF regime and then going into, the new regime under Abiy Ahmed, I was living in Ethiopia when we heard about those stories of, the oil tanker trucks full of money being intercepted on the way back to Mekelle. My wife and I have a sad laugh at this story, but very famous bakery, was owned by a Tigrayan, was known for making the best bread, some of the best baked goods in Addis Ababa. When the transition happened, they took the entire bakery apparatus, put it on a truck, and sent it back to Tigray, which is pretty interesting. Even by my old house in Arat Kilo, they found a car full of money under a bridge. Actually, I'm sorry, I correct that. A pallet of money under a bridge, wrapped and secured, but it was just waiting for a vehicle to transport it back to Tigray. So I knew about shenanigans, and I knew about propaganda and lies and what have you. And I kept hearing about, these issues of Eritrea. And even before the war, it's like, Eritrea has been demonized for a long time in the West. But then something was just not clicking historically from the vantage point of early Christianity to a country that existed on the Red Sea. I mean, the picture that you have that's presented of Eritrea is like, there is this barren moonscape on the Red Sea that has a harbor, but other than that, there's nothing there. And I was just like, what in the hell is that? That makes zero sense. It defies logic, right? So it's all of these things and more that made me go. And then in addition to that, my instructors, my theology instructors had talked to me long ago about there are things in Eritrea that if they are unlocked, they would change the shape of the understanding of black people in Christianity, of the black church, of everything. So I was like, well, all right, let's get to it. And then it's like, well, you don't have access to it because of X, Y, and Z. And then when all that changed, I was ready to go. And then when everything changed after the agreement between President Isaias and Abiy Ahmed, and I was like, okay, so I want to go to Eritrea. Because quite frankly, I want to start a business. I want to do X, Y, and Z on the Red Sea. So then the war happens and everything happens, and then I have a chance to go. And I systematically approached the country in a way that would allow me to dispel propaganda and false narratives. I did it pretty much as a tourist. I couldn't really access, sensitive areas because the war was still fluid, or still kind of fluid, even though we had the Pretoria Accords and what have you. So things were still tense. So I went in the other direction as a tourist, as a student of history, as somebody studying early Christianity and touching on early Islam. So from that standpoint, I was like a kid in a candy store. I was just like artifacts, history, monasteries that have been fluid and in relationship with the Gondari kings since, 17th, 18th century. So much history, and that's where I just went crazy. I went crazy in a beautiful way.
Did you find what you were looking for? Are you in the direction of finding what you're looking for?
I have one more, well, hopefully not just one more trip, but there's another trip that needs to be made desperately because there's a new dig taking place at Atlas right now, which I was invited to attend, but the timing and resources just collided and just weren't there. But I need to go back to Atlas and connect with Dr. Abraham and some of the other archaeologists, because I put forth some ideas about early church architecture and synagogue architecture and the Israelitish presence, not just in Yemen, but in the Horn of Africa and the trade routes. And I think we just need to come together and have a meeting of the minds where we discuss these things, and I'll bring books with me, and we'll go back to Atlas and we'll look at artifacts that they've uncovered and that have been newly exposed, that I hope can kind of make some people think about Christianity and Islam in Africa. Well, I think our Muslim brothers and sisters really know the score already and the history, but I think that the Black church in America owes it to itself to understand that the Christianity that Christ basically spawned is way different and looks vastly, I don't want to say contrary, because I don't want to, create a different atmosphere or environment, but I want to say that, we are, as people who believe, are supposed to be a different looking group of people focused on justice, making things right, fixing our problems, and, liberating and uplifting our communities, ourselves, with the help of the divine. And I don't think that we get a sense of that from my standpoint, when I'm surrounded by churches in Washington and there are a large number of homeless cities within this 10 by 10 mile square that are abysmal. And, for the people on the West Coast, you have Skid Row, which seems to fluctuate at 6,000 to 8,000 people, depending on what's happening there. And the city's ringed by mega churches. So, we need to be, or should be, practicing something that looks like what the Messiah gave us. And that would basically lead to us controlling and changing our environments and rescuing people who are struggling ourselves.
So you think that by going back to history, learning about your history, connecting to it, how that going to impact what you're thinking about?
Well, if you deal with the theology that was present in a country that basically had access to the disciples and the first century church, and people who had basically been with Yeshua, Jesus, during his lifetime, and you come to look at that theology like this is God sanctioned, and then you look at the theology that we've been dealt with, which is, no disrespect intended, but keeping it real, elements of the slave master kind of Christianity, and you see that they're diametrically opposed. It's almost like, modern day Christianity still reads from the slave Bible, because we are not a justice practicing people, I mean, we have heroes like, you know, Reverend Barber, who is the chief body and principal behind the Poor People's Campaign and Coalition. And he is seen as an anomaly. Whereas, you know, if we were more in line with our original theology, Reverend Barber would be the norm, you understand. There would be a Reverend Barber in every church. There'd be a Martin Luther Malcolm X in every church, because we would be justice oriented and justice focused and not
So
focused on.
Eritrea would be the gateway then to this connection.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there are two churches, two church bodies, two Paleo-Christian churches sitting in Adulis. And Adulis they've barely started to really uncover or excavate Adulis, you know? But then you get down to the meat and potatoes of what the everyday theology is, you know, as it relates to what existed in the Aksumite Empire, you know, what the region was dealing with as a Hebraic region, Jews and and for lack of a better term, Jewish Christians, new converts who were just converting to Christianity. I believe that if we start to show and understand that the religion was just basically a type of Judaism that reflected an acceptance of a Messiah, but not much else changed, and the focus being on justice and community, yeah, things might be different. You might get some people to think differently about the way they approach their faith and their communities and the divine and their responsibility.
So Eritrea, in a sense, brought you back to the original ideas that you have.
Yes.
That you had 2014 to study Christianity. So that is really a fascinating story, and so I'm glad that happened to you. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey in Eritrea? You know, I remember before you left, we did the Africa Forum.
Mm-hmm.
That was really interesting. You displayed a lot of the portraits that you brought from Ethiopia. It was at the ECCC in Washington, D.C., the Eritrean Community Center at Washington, D.C. You took great pictures there. And then you flew to Eritrea. And I would like you to talk about that journey. And the next day that you got in, as soon as you got into Asmara, you were sending out pictures of the city, and they were incredible pictures. You know, I'd like to share some of it with the audience. And can you talk about that?
Yeah, because of my travel, the way I travel, I have kind of navigated a way to deal with jet lag when I'm coming back east. So I basically I hit the ground running. You know, I connected with my my sister Melina Barakat, and she took me on a drive, and I was just awestruck. I was amazed. I mean, and when you first land in Asmara, I mean, you know, it's an airport. I mean, you see things in a distance. You see, there's a feel to it. It's just like a kind of a cross between antiquity and kind of mystery kind of thing going on. And then you pull into Asmara, and you're like, I need to spend a week here. As a photographer, as somebody who enjoys, you know, culture and sociological studies and architecture and all of these things, I'm like, I need to spend a week here. I need to walk from end to end to end to end. So I got my paperwork taken care of immediately so I could work. And, you know, I should just also add that I love food too. So that was part of it. So my whole thing is I did that. I tried to do that as much as possible. I walked. And, you know, the litmus test for me in any city is to basically get up and walk after dark, right? Walk after dark, you know, a little bit after sunset, you know, maybe like early evening, just take a walk, you know, go get dinner, feel the city out, feel the difference between day and night. And I was more concerned about somebody's dog getting out of their yard and chasing me than I was about anything else, because you could just kind of feel that people had a respect for humanity. I mean, I'm not naive, you know. I'm not naive. I grew up in a neighborhood back in Baltimore where people used to walk around with hammers because they were prepared to fight all the time, right? My father worked corrections for 24 years, and he basically taught me about the streets and how to deal with it and how to watch your back. That all melts away, you know, when you get there. And so I got to the point where I would leave my hotel. I'd walk clear across town down the main street. Forgive me for not remembering the name exactly, but I'd go to the same coffee shop. Get this. It's where the cathedral is. Yes, and I'd walk to the same coffee shop, get the same two donuts, and then I'd zigzag back through the community back to my hotel. And I was just kind of blown away by that. I was blown away by Asmara. Um, and after that, it's a situation where I traveled to Karen, which is fascinating as well. I'm going back to Karen. I'm actually going back because I want to hike when I get to Karen. I want to look at some of the Italian fortifications and places where they fought this battle with the British. Um, then you know, do that for a little while. I would love to get back to. I'd love to get to Gashbarka. Um, there's parts of the country that hold great significance, with many stories that need to be told that would help people to really understand more of the Western doublespeak about Eritrea. Um, so
I was really surprised, you know, in your previous interviews, how much you knew about the Battle of Karen and other historical significant stories about Eritrea. So, did you do some research, or were there anything that you referred to before you went there?
um, no, I completely I did something different with this trip. There were stories and things I'd read about, and I was like, you know what? Sometimes when I travel, I'll take a history book or two with me to read, if I don't do it beforehand. I was like, no, you know what? I've heard this, I've heard that, I read this, I read that. I'm just gonna go in and just be an open book and learn. One of the things I think is key is to you read, you do your research before you get there, and then you just let the city tell the rest. You let the location tell the rest of the story, and that's how you engage with other human beings. You let them narrate the rest of the story, right? So yeah, I can read about Karen on paper, and because you know I love military history and World War II history, I can read about this, and this. But I was like, no, let's go. Let's let somebody else talk about it. Um, so I kind of like that approach. I mean, because a history book is one thing, but somebody who lived through it is something different. So I kind of like to start with one and finish with the other. In terms of Masawa and Adolis, um, I was geeky. I was very geeky. I spoke to a major archaeologist before I left from Masawa. And then I had this Dr. Abraham who went with me to Adolis. And no, that was just something I was just like ready to. If I could have spent the night there, several nights in a row at Adolis, I would have. Um, but I wasn't prepared for what I saw. I saw online on Google, yeah, on Flickr, you'll see a picture of one of the churches. But you know, to go there and then just actually look at it, and then to see the entire region just covered in pottery, shards of pottery, and just sitting there like, wow, I wish I had the resources to just gather this all up and just do restoration. Um, I let Atlas surprise me, you know, and Masawa was, um, no, I'll just put it out here, and somebody can steal my idea. I don't care, but I would like to lead photo walks through Masawa. in Asmara. I know photographers come and they do these kind of things sometimes, but I think I would like to connect with our historians and do photo walks through these cities as a way to expedite the learning and exposure of exactly what's there. And the same thing for Karen as well. Yeah, it was simply incredible. It was incredible.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would like you to talk about or maybe touch upon is that a lot of the research that is being done in Eritrea is being done by Eritreans, at least led by Eritreans, even though there are some others.
Mm-hmm.
There.
Mm-hmm.
Can you touch upon that a little bit?
Yeah, my major resources were archaeologists and historians, all of Eritrean descent, all who live and work in Asmara or just outside of Asmara. Um, and I trusted them. I think, we got an ugly kind of elephant in the room when it comes to Africa and some people in Africa, whereas they will still take the word of a Ferengi or a foreigner or an outsider over their own. And I'm like, that's completely ludicrous, because if somebody goes to an accredited university, studies archaeology, gets a degree from an accredited university, and comes back and talks about their own neighborhood, why would I not listen to him before I listen to somebody who is from Stuttgart, Germany, who is just down here to study a little bit? You understand? I think as Africans, and a lot of people are starting to really get to that place, but you've got to trust your own. And I think that that's part of the way that the Westerners have handicapped us, is they've taught us not to trust our own, but to trust them over our own, while, behind our backs, they're taking your artifacts and resources out of your country, So, no, everybody I worked with was Eritrean. Everybody who I sat down and listened to and conversed with and talked to and asked questions to was Eritrean and had studied their fields immensely, or considerably.
You're talking about Eritrea as if you went home, as if you didn't go to a strange place. You're talking about it like you've been there for a long time, and it's really fascinating to hear you say that. And just what was your experience like in the city? Did you feel a stranger everywhere you went to?
No, I mean, people, there's a I'll call it an African methodology, because I experienced this a lot in South Africa and Zim, and in Ethiopia too. People from a distance will look you up and down and decide that you're not from there based upon your shoes, right? So, when you're walking through Johannesburg, people are like, we can tell you're not from here by your techies, as they call them, your sneakers, your shoes. But then I'll look at the haircut and the baldy or whatever, and I'll be like, okay, well then you can look like one of us. Didn't really feel that in Eritrea. I mean, some people could tell maybe because I'm wearing some clothes that come from a store that sells tactical gear. I buy these utilitarian pants that allow me to put a lot of things in my pockets, and I wear secure pockets and whatever because I like to travel with no bags. So they can look at you that way, but other than that, they don't sit and eyeball you and stare you up and down. People are cordial, they're friendly. I really, at that moment, wish that I spoke Tigrinya, because, greeting our elders and greeting the more astute people, the older people in the community, you wanted to engage in conversations because you knew that everybody had a story. So that's something that kind of I was like, I just wish I knew the language. But I had no issues in the country, nowhere.
So the perception that you took into the country and the realities did not match at all. And, did you see any kind of a political tension or any, what is your sense of what you saw in terms of how the country presents itself?
I get salty because, I see the effects of sanctions, and, certainly as somebody who, works as a photographer trying to upload your photos, or at least communicate and send photos or post positive stories even, the technology and the internet is an issue. you know. It's frustrating for me because I got there and I wanted to be like, wow, I want people to see this. But if I'm sending a picture every 8 minutes, then that gets to be a little difficult. And then sometimes that connection may drop. So you get a little frustrated because you want to share what you're seeing, you know? And what you're seeing is something that's like, it's incredible. I mean, there were times I didn't want to leave the hotel room. I just want to throw the window open and just sit there and just watch the sun go across the sky because I just kind of felt like, wow, there's something different here. There's a different kind of peace there. And I'll just, shameless plug. You get to Massawa and you stay in a Dalak hotel. Um, forget it. Forget it. 2 weeks. I could do 2 weeks there easy because I was just like, first off, the hotel's spectacular, but then to kind of walk into Massawa itself, the old city, and go in there 9 o'clock at night and see people. Hey, come down and sit and have some coffee, or come have some araki, or come have a bite of some food or something. People are just offering you food and drink. Have never seen you from Adam, but they're offering you. They're being hospitable with no intentions, no ill intentions, right? So no, I mean I could see myself just kind of relaxing and exploring the city, and doing like whole stories, like travel stories on the environment when I go back. Um, but yeah, there's no issues. There was no issues for me, and you know I'm somebody that loves Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe has always kind of been like my home. Um, but I would say that I found a place that brings me just as much peace as Zimbabwe, if not a little more. You know?
I certainly consider you a role model for blacks, Africans, everybody for that matter. And I think what you've done, what you're doing, is incredible. And the fact that you are becoming a bridge to a lot of things, to in terms of the media, in terms of the religious studies that you would like to pursue, in terms of the connections of blacks with their history, and in terms of fairness. All this to me is very, very significant, and it serves a great deal of service to humanity. And how do you pass that on to the young generation? How do you pass this kind of teaching so young people can do the kind of things that you do, especially blacks? Can you?
Well, it's kind of hard to describe the kind of energy that exists between young black photographers when you first meet. There's an excitement that people actually share in a passion for photography, for good photography, and also an understanding, a non-colonial imperialist understanding of Africa. I think the way is visual. I mean, we're at a stage now where we're mainly more a visual species, and especially if you interact with photographers and creatives first, you how can I say, you light the fire. You strike a match, and you're the spark that like ignites a fire within other people just through corresponding visually, communicating visually. Some of my alumni who I came out of Howard with, I mean, we're all working in our respective creative fields. And one of my partners, I call him my brother, he's a painter, and he is a masterful kind of, how can I call it, more of a realist. And he's been, scheming on, in a good way, reproducing some of my photos, but in painting form. Acrylic painting. So it's interactions like that, and meeting with other creatives and showing them, things that may inspire them. I am completely enamored with the whole Red Sea connection. And then at the same time, even though it's a little harder to photograph in Karen, I'm enamored with just the look and feel of the city. Um, but yeah, there's ways to do it. You kind of have to like show people what's possible, show people what's out there, and invite them. You know, bring them on. Say, you know what? If you got a couple weeks, you can come back to Eritrea with me. You know, we'll get your passport, get your credentials to kind of just work as a journalist in the country, and then just go at it. Completely go at it. You know. Yeah, there's ways to do it, but it's all about being sincere and telling people what really exists out there. You know, I don't know if that's like it's not a poetic answer, but
No, no,
that's
I think it's exactly the kind of answer. And how do we teach the young generation your experiences? You're talking about, you have a background that goes back to the years in Vietnam. You've seen journalism in ways that this young generation have not, and so you want to pass it on, especially to the kids in Africa. I would like you, for example, to teach in Asmara, photojournalism. That would be an incredible thing to do that.
I'd do it in a minute. I'd do it in a minute. I'd be on the plane tomorrow.
So, in line with that question, what I would like to ask you is, how did you find the diaspora connection, the diaspora Eritrea connection with Eritrea itself? How did you? I'm sure you did not think about this, this question, but I think it would be because Milena, who you spoke about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Abraha, a lot of them were educated in the West and went back. They work in Eritrea, and you met us. You met with me before you left, and you see that the connection that we have with Eritrea. How did you find that? How does?
I think you should consider something that you may take for granted, right? When you leave Asmara, you basically pass through one, two, like three extremes as you make your way down to Massawa, maybe four, right? All of them are breathtaking. When I stopped on the road to take a photo of the clouds, when I was with Melina, and I saw the beekeeper come out of his house. He was kind of across the valley, and I waved to him. He waved at me, and I'm sitting here like, here's a man who lives on the side of a mountain who's a beekeeper and who produces his own honey, and God knows what else he produces. He sustains himself, right? I went to a village to look at infrastructure development and agriculture. And I discovered that everybody in that village had a beehive. They produced their own honey, right? In addition to farming their own crops, which they use to sustain themselves and then to sell at market. There are so many things that are right outside your door that kind of fill you in a kind of a spiritual, metaphysical sense, right? So you can experience things that are what we always learned were very National Geographic in a matter of minutes, right? You can be in Massawa in 2 hours, 2.5 hours, right? Depending on who's driving. You can be in an actual desert in an hour and some change. You're in the mountains shrouded in clouds in 15 minutes after you leave Asmara. All of these environments are right at your fingertips, and you get a chance to say, wow, this is my country. By comparison, right now, if I were to leave Alexandria and drive into the Shenandoahs, it's a couple hours, right? And it's like, okay, well, this is a natural wonder, the Shenandoahs. If I want to go and look at, let's say, if I want to go to the Atlantic Ocean, it's a couple of hours, and then it's like I got to drive a few more hours to find somewhere that's attractive that I like. You basically have everything within a reasonable distance, and even what you have that's close by is still exceptional, right? So I think that you have a compact, lush piece of how can I say it without sounding cliche? A beautiful country to appreciate that I think maybe if you went back home and you were just moving about, you might just be like, "Oh yeah, it's nice here." I'm like, "No, it's gorgeous. It's really gorgeous, right?" And that's what I'm saying. Maybe people take that for granted. I don't know if that
No,
makes sense.
no, actually, we don't take it for granted. We are extremely grateful for everything. The only thing is that we were impeded from doing what we want to do, what we needed to do because of all the sanctions and the things that you mentioned, the hostilities. But I think things are changing for the better, and I think you are an indication of it. The fact that you're able to be able to go there and give a testimonial like you're doing, and to have a connection, a relationship with us. And this is going to be a platform that grows. This is going to be something that we are going to nurture, make sure that it grows. I think that's the reason why people need to go to the Instagram GoFundMe that you have, so you can do more of this. And so, for the listeners out there, make sure to go to his Instagram, Jemal Countess Instagram page, and there's a GoFundMe there. Make sure to support what he's doing, because from what you heard, a lot of what he's doing in his own as a contractor. So this is something that we need to support, all of us, so we can get more of. So I do appreciate everything that you're doing, everything that you've done. So, just in closing, what would you like to say?
Well, I'm going to be selfish and jump back to the whole subject of religion. Adolis is a game changer. Adolis is a global game changer, completely. Theologically speaking, I mean, the ramifications for Christianity on the continent before the close of the first century, almost real time, as disciples and converts are coming and going from Jerusalem, traversing, the Red Sea and going to Egypt, and then traversing the trade routes into the rest of Africa. I think that with not just ample proof, but with rock solid proof and history to go along with it, I think it would really kind of make people consider a lot of things about the faith. In terms of Massawa, there is some restoration that is planned for Massawa of the old city, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to exploring the rest of the Red Sea coast, because the Dalek Islands look incredible. And there's actually there's some places that I feel I need to kind of explore, not just from a tourist standpoint, but an archaeological standpoint. I mean, there are multiple reasons for going back to Massawa and Adolis alone. Selfishly, the best fish I had in the world, I had in Massawa. That may sound trivial, but it was the best fish on the planet. I'm sorry to my fish places in Bahar Dar, but no, that was the best fish I had on the planet, period. So, but more importantly, I want to go back and I want to talk about the way the country sustains itself in the face of all the challenges, and really look at how it manages to develop its people first, its rural communities first, as opposed to focusing on the urban centers. I mean, I just got a real sense that the way things happen there happened differently, and they were effective in creating a more sound society. That's just my opinion. I did ask hard questions. I did ask about mandatory service. I asked about X, Y, and Z things, and all the things that the propagandists like to throw in your face. And I had to confront that. You had to confront that. You got to ask the questions. And I was satisfied with the answers I got, and they made perfect sense. So
I think the number one focus for Eritrea is the human resources, and you can see it throughout.
Yes.
um, the life cycle of a human being. One of the books that Dr. Feller wrote is about child mortality rate. The Eritreans have to read that book. It's really incredible. It just shows you the progression of how the human resources development process is extremely important in Eritrea, and the uniformity by which we are doing it is incredible. So I'm so glad that you noticed it, and I'm so glad that you were able to express it. And so, but where can people reach out to your work? Where can people see your work? How can people engage you? How can people maximize on your program?
Well, they can go to Jemal Countess on Instagram and Jemal Countess Photography. There's 2 Instagram pages, right? That's JemalCountess. Then my website is just simply called Jemal Countess, which I'll be updating. And then if you do a search on Getty Images under the news tab, and you do a J Countess search, you can see the work that I've done in Eritrea. Other than that, I'm working on a couple more platforms. I engage Twitter. I have a Twitter handle as well, which is just Jemal Countess. You can do Twitter as well, but there's not as much. It's more so because of the type of work I do as a visual creator. I use Instagram more. So Instagram is probably your best bet.
I feel truly honored for giving me the opportunity to come and tell your story and tell the story of Eritrea and Ethiopia. And I appreciate everything that you do, and thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Thank you. I appreciate this.
Thank you.